Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us once again for Mondays with Mark. Just our usual housekeeping announcements before we get going. We ask that you please leave your microphone muted throughout the duration of the program, just so we don't have any background noise and it's easier to hear our guests and our host. If you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat function up top there. It's a little conversation bubble. You can go ahead and click on that and type your question in, and we'll monitor that to make sure it gets asked of our guest. And then if you want, you can also use the little raise hand, the smiley face emoji with the raise hand next to it. You can click on that. You'll raise your hand and we can unmute and you can ask your question verbally as well. But without any further ado, I want to turn it over to our host, our district director here in Rhode Island for the SBA, Mark Hayward.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's great to be back. I apologize to everybody for not being here last week. I know that there was a lot of people who were interested in the OSHA discussion. Unfortunately, I had an unexpected bout with COVID, and everything is fine. Tested negative for the last 3.5 days, so I feel great, look great. First day was a little bit rough, but other than that, came through quite well, and I'm really happy about that. But today we have Raul Figueroa. Now, a lot of people ask questions. We have guests of all different kinds and all different organizations, and this is a little bit unique because Raul is the head of an organization called Fazua, and I know I'm going to get that wrong. How do you pronounce it again, Raul?
Fuerza Laboral.
Fuerza Laboral, and basically what this organization is about to help entrepreneurs here in Rhode Island. So I want to start by giving you the opportunity, Raul, to just try to discuss the organization onto itself, and then we'll get into a little bit more specifics on certain things that you're doing.
Of course, yeah. So thank you, Mark, and thank you for having me here today. So the organization Fuerza Laboral was founded about a little over 16 years ago. And our primary focus is helping workers with any type of labor violations. Like we have workers who experience wage theft, accidents at work, and things of that nature. So for the past 6 years, we have been focusing on helping the people who come to our office for those problems to start their own business. So that's when we decided to help them form these workers cooperatives. So a workers cooperative is when a group of people get together and run that business collectively, right? So they share the responsibilities among all the members, and all members have the same amount of power, which is one vote per person. And we have our success, but that kind of solidify when we as a as a lead organization introduced this legislation in 2017 to recognize workers cooperatives as a new form of corporation here on the island. So we kind of were from we kind of building this cooperative movement from the bottom up, and that was one of our first steps. So now cooperatives are recognized here as the legal entity, and it's important because we want to maintain the culture of cooperatives, and we want to maintain, we want them to have its own identity. So that's kind of what has been our our progress over the past 6 years, and now cooperatives have a little much easier path than it did when the law was first enacted in 2018. So we feel pretty proud about that track of success.
So, Raul, what are some of the businesses that have been established as a cooperative business where it's joint ownership? And then I want to get into some of the finance side of it as well.
Yeah, of course. So the most recent ones. Also, I'm gonna start with like there are cooperatives on all industries. The very first one we helped to incubate was a commercial cleaning, which became really successful during COVID because everybody was looking for sanitation services.
Right.
We also had another one. It's a printing cooperative. It's called Bread and Roses, and that also became very successful because in 20 during the elections in 2020, they were able to, everybody was nobody was really knocking on doors, so everybody was looking for mailers and all those and things of that nature, yard signs. So they'll also have some success during COVID. Ever since then, there has been a lot of different cooperatives in different industries. Some of the most recent ones it's called Rhode Island Birth Workers Cooperative. It's been a group of doulas organized to form this as a cooperative, because now doulas can actually bill insurance companies for the work that they do. That is why
Midwives.
midwives, yeah.
Yeah.
And then not doing the
Sorry, I'm kind of ancient, so
yeah. It took me a while to understand, honestly, Mark, because even though we don't have to be experts on the industry, we do have in order to be helpful, in order to support these businesses, we do have to learn a little bit about the industry, right? So
right.
it's a little complicated at
I
first.
understand.
Yeah, but it takes a little while. And so then we have another one in the that is run by neurodivergent workers, which is people who have disabilities.
Right.
And this is the only disabled worker-owned cooperative in the United States. They are in operation, and they have offices here in Pawtucket. We're working with another cooperative that they themselves are foster parents, and they want to form this cooperative um, to educate, train, and do home visits for other people who want to become foster parents, which is very, very unique. Um, and then we also work with other cooperatives that are been in existence before, which is it's called Soul Power, which is the solar installation.
Right.
Now there's another one that was recently converted from traditional business into a cooperative, which is called White Electric um, Coffee Shop. It's just in Providence. And we have also worked with other. There's one that's called 3D Anatomy, which they build 3D figures of sharks and different animals for universities to use as a teaching tool.
Are these both not for profit as well as for profit? Do you see both of those different types of businesses, or are they just concentrated in the for profit or just concentrated in not for profit?
As of right now, the only one that we have worked with that is not for profit is called PVD Things, which is a
Okay.
tool sharing cooperative. Just like provide services from like, let's see, if you need a saw, or you need a lift blower or anything like that.
So the rest of them are all for profit, Raul.
The rest I'm all for profit, and even though profit, obviously, they are a business, so they have to turn a profit.
Right.
But profit is not the ultimate, like the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to establish a business that can be successful and sustainable,
Right.
and provide safe employment for all the workers.
So you're really talking about something that they can have ownership, that they can realize and retain, and they can build on. And I'm interested. Are there any? Because hospitality is such a huge industry here in the state of Rhode Island. Have you seen any hospitality co-ops that have? And I realize that you haven't mentioned any, but are they existing among all of the co-ops that you're talking about?
As of right now, I'm sure they are. There are other that we don't quite have relationship with, or we have helped in the process. But I know of people who have at least in the process right now of forming this cooperative. The only one is right now. It's like it was just in the service industry, which is the White Electric coffee shop. But
Right.
that there is a lot of and so there's like so that we have workers cooperative, and we also have employee owned businesses, right? There's more in the
Right.
in the in that industry, like it's in the service industry. I think it's a little more heard of when like to have employee-owned businesses instead of really cooperatives, which they both serve, a purpose, and they both are, like each model has a unique, pros and cons as everything else. But
Right.
that's when you see the most, like employee-owned, like businesses like that.
Is there a distinction between an ESOP, which is employee owned, and a cooperative?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, like I'm not an expert on ESOPs,
Right.
but like the main difference that I see is that in ESOP, yes, you are an employee and you are part owner of the business, but you don't really
Right.
have a say in. You don't really have, like that much stake to kind of, like make suggestions or directions in which way the company needs to run, which is in the cooperative, it's kind of, like you are part of the business, so you are part owner, but you also make the help with your coworkers to make the decision in which way you want the business to, to run. So you have a little more room for input than you do in ESOPs.
How
It's
do you
more.
find, how do they find, so, because, capital is regardless of what kind of business organization you have, be a cooperative, an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, or an ESOP, you need capital. I mean, that's really that is the lifeblood of small business.
Yeah.
How do these cooperatives access capital? And, we're all, from an SBA standpoint, Raul, we're always talking about, yes, it's nice. You have to have skin in the game, but you also have to be able to guarantee this particular loan because nobody wants them to put the key in the door and walk away. So how would you finance a cooperative?
Yeah, that has been our struggle since the beginning, and that's because traditional lending institutions do not, um, like do not lend to cooperatives, right? Because there's not just one owner. So for the most part, each individual member have to go and apply for a loan, a personal loan, on their own in order to finance the business, right? Or they they rely on CDFIs,
Right.
or what other cooperatives have done, which is a direct public offering. It's another option. And then you have the traditional, like funding programs that like a GoFundMe, or individual fundraiser and stuff like that. But it's hard to get, like to work with lending institutions to support these businesses. So right now there's not a path, and it's not a unique problem to Rhode Island. It's a unique problem to, like to the way the banking system works, you know, and the whole United States. So every cooperative, regardless of where they are, have the same problem.
I have to tell you, I actually signed the loan. We did a cooperative
You
with
did.
an SBA guarantee. Yep, a
Oh,
little bit a little bit bigger than what you would normally visualize a cooperative, Raul. It was the Fishermen's Cooperative in Point Judith, down
okay.
on the fishing pier. So it was, if everybody's going to the Block Island boat, and you're on the boat, you look to the right, there's a bunch of boats there, and then there's this big building. Well, that was the Fishermen's Co-op. That was financed by it was financed by, I think at the time, Bank of America, and it was guaranteed by the SBA. Um, for whatever reasons, there were also issues. We did have all of the members of the co-op had to sign and guarantee the loan. So I think, and I'll come back to this, but I think there may be some mechanisms by which to get co-ops funded, but everybody had to sign and guarantee the loan. The loan eventually went south, and the reason was prices of fish, um, dealings within the co-op itself. And I think, I'd like you to talk about that, because everybody in the sandbox has got to get along, because if they don't get along, it could have impacts on the co-op long term. And I know you're shaking your head, Raul. We all know we know what that's like. But I just do think that there are alternatives. And I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll ask you to respond. But I was talking to Oscar Mejias, and Oscar has a program by which to help startups or people who are just in business. Are you familiar with that program where I think that's absolutely brilliant, where they get a loan from, I think it's Navigant Credit Union. You have to pay back the loan over a 24-month period. And if you pay back, and we're not talking about large sums, we're talking about mediocre, then the funding that they have at the Rhode Island Hispanic Chamber pays off the loan. You've now established credibility as an organization and as a business to be able to get an SBA loan beyond that. So I want to turn it over to you because there's a lot of things that are potential here.
Yeah, and I think like some of those things that you mentioned have been recent. Maybe like some of those things were established during the COVID months. So I think like during COVID, I think this like people started thinking about different ways, right? Because honestly, like people realized that the the ways that we were doing business before was not working right for some people. So I think there was like this new initiatives and new opportunities that right now are really just like it's starting to like come out to the surface. So there is like there is a different opportunities right now that we are right now are encouraging future cooperatives to explore. We also have to learn ourselves exactly how it works so we can be helpful to these for these cooperatives. But yeah, I mean there's like going back to the fact that people do need to get along, right? Need
Yeah.
to get and the cooperative. So that's why we focus a lot on education, right? There's the education of like
Critical.
anywhere from like from what is a cooperative to the point where you are working with your incorporation papers to the to the Secretary of State office, and then after that we stay with them for 2 years to make sure that like
Excellent.
the things like like work and march alone. Like always encouraging to like how to like working with them on how to build their board, how to make decisions, and like it takes a while, right? And and I think that's probably one of the keys that like that has made this cooperative successful, and some of them
Right.
that have failed is the fact that like so a lot of them put the work ahead of time into building a really good team, right? Sometimes, Mark, we have started with groups of 30 or even 35. By the end, we end up with a group of 3 or 4 people. And
Right.
then by the end of the process, maybe those even the 4 people who were there, maybe only one actually made it. And then new people, like came on board after a while. So it's not for everybody, right? It's not for
Right.
everybody. Some people just want to come and learn a little more. And and then make the decision like later on, but it's crucial. One of the key parts is it's to build a team, and then to also like really focus on the principles of cooperatives.
You don't have to be a member of the cooperative in order to be employed by the cooperative, correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that there's some kind of fallacy. People are not understanding. Oh, I can go work for Raul, but I'm not a member of that cooperative. But that
yeah.
doesn't prevent me from working for you, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a matter of fact, like as you grow, everybody comes on board as an employee, right? And then during that time, like there's education. You can
Right.
get be part of all this, like trainings and education and all those resources that a lot of the times our partners provide. And then once you're, like go through a a process that the cooperative has established. Some cooperatives say you have to work with us for a year, or you have to work here for 6 months, or a certain amount of hours. Then after that, and participate in all these programs, educationals, and all this and that. Like, and after that, you make the decision, right? We want to make sure that the new members come on board once they have all the information they need to make an informed decision, right?
Right.
Because we don't want to they don't want pressure people to like join if they're not ready, because then it's just that's just gonna fall apart.
So if somebody came to you and said, Raul, I want to start a cooperative, what would be the process that you would guide them or advise them as they're, you just don't start, okay, I'm going to open a business. I'm going to rent a place. There is a whole process. Kind of like with us, we say if you want to start a business, you got to have a business plan, and I'm assuming that you do very similar.
Yeah, we do very similar. Like obviously, we have like like kind of our intake, like sheet where
Right.
we, and usually if they come here, they want to start a cooperative because it's because they know a little bit about cooperatives, right? They're familiar with the with what they are. They're familiar with like how they're structured. So we feel confident that at least they have basic knowledge around that, right? But then after that, like let's dig in more into the business. What is your business plan? What is your market? Like all those things that like you will ask of any business, regardless of how they are structured. Right. And then like sometimes those people realize, oh, that was not a good idea. There's no market for this, and there's no business, and I was passionate about it, but this is not gonna work. And then they go back to the drawing board, and then we might see it a couple months down the line. But that is the our first step, right? We do an intake, and where we ask all those critical questions, and then if there is
Do
a
you
viable
find this
business.
do you find this predominant in the Hispanic community or all communities across the board?
There's all communities across the board. Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's just a
Okay.
lot of the cooperatives are, like are a healthy mix of people from different backgrounds, and not just in business, but also culturally and professionally.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because it gives a diversity to not only the organization, but it also depends upon what line of work that they're going to go into. Do you find that this is more and I'm trying to determine, is this more kind of hardcore businesses or how could I put this? It's not necessarily the consulting side of uh, the program. It's more the service industry side of it, and that we're looking a potential for a cooperative. I'm just finding, is there potential for, because we have a lot of people who come here, Raul, and say, oh, I want to start a consulting business, and I have 4 friends that want to come in on it. I'm not sure that that's the cooperative kind of business that would, or the normal cooperative kind of business that we would see. So are we looking at like service industry kind of determinations?
Well, I think there's both. I think there's room for both.
Okay.
Even though we do have had some people who want to start a consulting business, such as like, and you also have a bookkeeping like cooperatives, and like those are kind of like like a little more like in the not in the service provided, but in more in the like do consultant for
Right.
different businesses, for different like there's people who have come here with an idea of a grant writing consultant for
Oh,
nonprofits as a cooperative. Like, and there is a people who want to do urban planning, also a cooperative in urban planning. Like, so there are like some of those things have taken a little more time, but there are things areas where we have done work. Like, fortunately they like they have not happened to materialize, but not for reasons that you will expect. Is people move on, people change lives, and
at the very beginning of this, Raul, you mentioned about workers' rights and about getting, making sure that you get the wage that you're guaranteed, that you're being treated fairly.
yeah.
What side of the I mean, because I know cooperatives are a major part of what you do, but that's also a part of what you do, is it not?
Yeah, 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 and that's that. I mean, that is I had to say that is the DNA of the work that we do. Because of experiences from working that side, is that made us realize that we needed a more permanent solution. To those problems, and the truth is because like we have people coming to our office, right, because of wage theft, which is the most common one, right? They
Right.
didn't get paid over time, or I work for this employer and didn't pay me for the last 2 months, and things like that. And so
So I'm
realize,
assuming that you work with, actually, they're right next door to us, the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division.
right?
And this is basically, and a lot of people may not be familiar with this, but this is, if you're an employer, you are required by law to provide wages to whoever that individual is based upon certain criteria. And if you can't, if they work over X amount of hours, they have to be paid at X a time and a half or whatever it is. And I think some of the issues that you're talking about, Raul, where people come to you and say, hey, listen, I've been working and I haven't got paid for my hours, haven't got paid overtime. I should be getting paid this, but they're not paying me. And you help individual with cases, I'm assuming with the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division.
Yeah, that's what we do. We help them. We we make the recommendations and we follow with them for each individual case. Once we are able to like solve the problem at that time, we also working with them to learn their rights. This is what you need to be looking for. These are your rights. This is what like needs to happen. Like in these areas. There's so many things. There's so many components, right? And then but the problem was that like education alone wasn't an answer, because a couple months down the line the same people were coming back to us because of another labor violation from another employer. So there's like as we get more creative, as we do more education, so is the people who are like the bad employers, right? The bad employers a lot of the times, so like they get creative too, right? And sometimes like, and we don't get to hear from everybody, right?
Do
But
you
that
do
was
seminars on that to kind of teach people, what they should be looking out for?
yeah. Actually, like one of the my coworkers is actually going to Newport today to do a know your rights, labor rights this afternoon. We work with closely with other organizations, Progreso Latino, and other community organizations where we provide those education. It's about 45-minute presentation of know
Right.
your rights, and then usually people, if you hear something, oh, this is happening to me, so I'm gonna call them and see what we can do. A lot of the times, we solve the problem with a phone call to the employer and say, like, let's solve this problem before we had to bring it to either the Attorney General's office, the Center for Justice, which is the another community partner, or the Department of Labor and Training. That usually takes care of it, but there are also other people who are like, nope, I want to go all the
Yep.
way. And I was like, all
We're
right.
down to 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a question for Raul, you can put it up in. You can raise your hand, or you can put it into the chat. The interesting thing, Raul, is what it reminds me is that commercial that talks about the individual who hired someone, and he said, "Oh, I should be getting a slip when I get paid every week," and which I think is a great commercial because the individual almost lost his business because the young child said, "Oh, my father works for the state," and he says that I should be getting a pay slip every week. But that's what you're talking about. The very
Yeah.
simplest of, and I know from a small business perspective, Raul, we at SBA teach, hey, listen, this is what you need to do in order to be successful. Follow the law and nothing will ever happen. And that's really important. I think, and what you're doing is you're representing people on the other side saying, hey, listen, if you have these issues, we're happy to help you.
Yeah.
When should we discourage the creation of a cooperative? That was a question that was posed in the chat.
And yeah, could you repeat it? When did we
When would we discourage, I think, let me just
Mhm.
look at it again. When should we discourage the creation of a cooperative?
When I guess if I understand the question correctly, is like you discourage that when when you see tendencies of I want to be the only person who make decisions here, right?
Right.
If everybody had that same mentality, then all of you should go and start your own business individually, not as a cooperative. Like and or when you start seeing as a like you started like taking more like more of a head roll of like this is the way it's gonna get done, and
Right.
I know because I used to own a business, that type of thing, and you should all do what I say. Those are the kind of things that you see the like like red flags right off the bat, and sometimes it's just you have to change like the mentality, and you have to understand what perspective these people like this individuals bring, or the history of why they like they bring these ideas. Sometimes you can find solutions or common ground. Sometimes there isn't, and nobody wants to waste their time. They can go on, and if they want to change their mind later on, perfect, you can come back. But as of right now, I think we're gonna have to.
Great answer. And believe it or not, we're out of time. I want to thank Raul Figueroa for joining me today. It's great to see you again. I think it's a great organization. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Raul. We have his contact information. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great Mondays with Mark. See you next week.
Thank you.